Welcome in, everyone. Today we are going to talk about Kaisa, Daughter of the Void.
Stay with me, and we live.
I'll put on screen what this video is going to cover, and those will be the chapters in the description below, so feel free to jump around as you want. But in general, we're going to cover explaining the champion, packages on how to build the deck, go into a little bit of sideboarding and matchups, but also I really think that a budget discussion is worthwhile since a lot of these cards are getting upwards of like $70 to $80, and I know not everybody has that kind of money. I do have some budget options. They're not always, great replacements, but they're going to be there. I do want to highlight the game did just release, so the meta discussion as well as my own knowledge is kind of limited. Again, Riftbound literally just released 3 days ago. A lot of it is based on like the Chinese stuff that we've seen and some of my own testing. Now that the game's out, I've been playing a lot of it and I have played a lot of it on Tabletop Simulator. I'm not trying to say I'm an expert at the game by any means. I want this to be kind of a jumping off point for everybody, and we can use it to discuss in the comments below or in my Discord. Speaking of my Discord, it is rather small on the Riftbound side, but it's intended to allow people to find games on Tabletop Simulator and talk and discuss deck building. I also really highlight a section that I have called No Dumb Questions, and that's intended to allow newer players to come in and ask any question they want, whether they think it's dumb or not. My community will give you an answer without the fear of someone being a complete and utter dick to you. My Discord's completely free. The link will be in the description below. And lastly, I do have a TCG player affiliate link. If you want to buy singles of Riftbound, you could use my link. I do get a portion of the money you spend on TCG player. It's no extra cost to you, and it does support my channel. So that will also be in the description below. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Firstly, let's talk about the legend Kaisa, Daughter of the Void. She's in Fury in Mind, and she has this ability with reaction timing. You may tap this legend to add 1 power of any color used only to play spells. So to be clear, this symbol here is to add a power. It can only be used to pay the power cost. So like if you look at Void Seeker, if you were to play it with Kaisa, you would still need to tap 3 of your runes to pay for the energy, but you would not need to recycle any runes to pay for the power cost. Instead, you could just exhaust Kaisa and use her ability. The benefit that Kaisa gives us is she allows us to use powerful spells that are balanced using power costs without setting us back as much or sometimes even at all. We can play these strong spells like Falling Star or Hextech Ray and continue to be on curve for the rest of the game. These small increments of value can add up. If you use Kaisa's ability like 4 times in a game, eventually that's like 2 whole turns worth of power costs that you got to completely ignore because of your leader. And that's just a really powerful effect to have at any time in the game. Before we get into like the actual deck building talk, let's talk about the chosen champion. So Kaisa has 2 options. We have the Fury version of Kaisa, Kaisa Survivor, which is a 4 cost, no power unit with 4 might, accelerate, and the text when I conquer, draw 1. The other version that we could use is the Mind version of Kaisa, Kaisa Evolutionary, who is a 6 energy, 1 power unit with 6 might. She also has the ganking text, so she can go from battlefield to battlefield, and then she has the text, when she conquers, you may play a spell from your trash, which is just your discard pile, with energy cost less than your points without paying its energy cost, but you still need to pay the power cost. And Kaisa's leader ability can kind of mitigate this for us. So the Kaisa we decide to use as our chosen champion is Kaisa Survivor for essentially 3 reasons. Reason 1 is she's just really cheap. Only being 4 energy and no power cost on a champion unit is actually really strong. There are only 7 0 power champion units in the game, and of those, only 4 of them can be used as chosen champion units right now because their leader isn't in the game yet. So when it comes to efficient costs, Kaisa Survivor is just very good, especially given that she has 4 might. That's like on curve, so it's not bad at all. The second thing about Kaisa is she can be accelerated. For effectively 5 energy and 1 power, you can instantly move her and conquer a battlefield with her. She is weak for 5 energy, 1 power, but coming in ready and able to move is a big deal. Accelerate is a really strong effect in this game. The final reason we use Kaisa Survivor is the when I conquer, draw 1 text. Oftentimes, you can even just play her on turn 2 without accelerate, and then on turn 3, you can move her in, get a conquer, and then draw a card. And that's going to give us way more options for this turn and future turns and let us plan out what we want to do. It also lets us get into our power cards faster. And Kaisa Evolutionary just comes out a turn later at 6. She costs a power no matter what. She doesn't have accelerate, and often we just don't care about playing the cards from our trash. Ganking is nice, but not always necessary. So for all of those reasons, we use Kaisa Survivor as our chosen champion. And welcome to the rest of the video. So this is how I like to do all my deck tech guides, where I show the actual cards like on screen in the actual decks that I built. You can see I've got my Kaisa champion here. I did actually pull a showcase, so I'm obviously going to use it. And then this is the Kaisa Survivor chosen champion. I will put on screen like the normal version just so you can compare, but I did pull this, so I'm going to play it. So those 2 are in my deck. There's I think 1 more alternate art Darius in my deck, but you can see the normal art there. It's all 3 of the same Darius, so that might be a little bit confusing, but I hope it clears it up. And I like to build by what's called packages, and let's talk about them. Packages essentially are groups of cards that you can bundle together in your mind, and they all kind of do a similar thing. Kaisa, her strategy is effectively a mid-range value deck that wants to conquer early on and then win the game with big power spikes towards the end. We play good units on curve, and our removal spells get to be played ignoring power penalties, allowing us to continue playing on curve for most of the game. We are not a hold-based strategy where some decks like Ari and Master Yi really want to hold battlefields. We do want to hold battlefields. Obviously, holding battlefields is nice. We can pull our stuff back and get no issue, right? If Master Yi stops defending, he loses his leader ability. For us, we can actually pull off of battlefields where it's safer in our base and then just keep conquering. So we're a conquer-based strategy. Since we're kind of aggressive in any mid-range aggressive deck, we do want to conquer early, and we are, like I said, a conquer-based strategy. So we play a lot of 2 energy cards. And 2 energy cards are actually really important in this deck. We run 2 of the Pouty Poro. So Pouty Poro is a 2 energy, 2 might unit with Deflect. And you might think like that's okay, right? You get to basically turn 1, you play your Pouty Poro, and then on turn 2, if you go to like conquer a battlefield, either if your opponent went first, they went to one battlefield, you go to the other. Or if you went first, you get first choose like what battlefield you go to. The Deflect is really nice on Pouty Poro because you move him into a battlefield, and what Deflect says is your opponents must pay 1 power to choose this guy with a spell. So it actually like sets your opponent back half a turn if they want to try and remove him. And honestly, like oftentimes that's the wrong move for them. So you get your early conquer point or you set them back, both which are good things to do. I run 2 and they're just really strong. A 2-cost 2 might with Deflect is honestly pretty decent. And next up is Ravenbloom Student, another 2 energy, 2 might unit with the text, when you play spell, give me +1 might this turn. And I run 3 of these. And the reason why we run these is kind of self-explanatory, right? We run a lot of spells, and since we do get to ignore the power cost of our spells, right, we get to play a lot more of them. Ravenbloom Student's actually just really, really good. She's just a really good card to contest battlefields early. So let's say that you went second, right? So you played your Ravenbloom Student, and now she's ready to go conquer a battlefield. Well, if your opponent played a small 2 or 3 might unit, what Ravenbloom Student can do, and something that's actually like extremely powerful, is you can use like your Hextech Ray, which I have sitting right here, and with Kaisa, we get to ignore the power cost. So what you can do is you can actually move in to conquer a battlefield with Ravenbloom Student, Hextech Ray on top of this. So Hextech Ray does 3 damage, and we get buffed 1. And you've basically still, if it's turn 2 and you went second, right, you have 5 runes up right now. So you spend 1 of your runes, you have 4 runes remaining, and you've basically effectively dealt 6 damage to whatever your opponent had. Most likely, you'll probably trade, and you lose your Ravenbloom Student, but they lose their turn 1 play, and you have 4 resources to bring in, your Kaisa Survivor unit. Now, she wouldn't be ready, but it would just be a turn that you can do, right? So Ravenbloom Student's a really good early play. She's also really good late game because you get to use a lot of cheap spells, and she gets +1 might for each one, so she can actually stack up and be kind of a threat that your opponent didn't realize. The next turn 1 plays that we have is 3 of the Watchful Sentry, and Watchful Sentry is a 2 energy, 1 might unit with Death Kneel, draw 1. So it's a pretty simple card. He dies, you get to draw a card. He's really good to, again, you play early. If you go turn 1, you're on the play. You play this as your turn 1 play, you go to conquer a battlefield. And it's kind of a similar thing to the Poro where, okay, if your opponent tries to get rid of them, you get a benefit, right? So it's either you get a point or you get to draw a card, and we get to draw into our power cards, both of which are good options for us. Now, obviously, we probably would like to conquer first, but it's just, you get your Death Kneel. So that's why I like Watchful Sentry. I do run 3 of them. You might be seeing a 3-cost unit here, and you might be wondering why. So without lecturing Yordle here, let's take a little break. The Watchful Sentries, the Ravenbloom Students, and the Poros, that's 8 turn 1 plays. And if you basically try to hard mulligan for your turn 1 plays, you have an 83% chance of seeing at least one of these guys, right? Because you draw 4, you get to recycle 2 to draw 2 more, and then you get to draw 1 card off the top of your deck. So you effectively see 7 cards. And with 8 turn 1 plays and seeing 7 cards, you have an 83% chance of seeing any of these turn 1 plays. But if you go second, we actually add in 2 other cards, and they're both Lecturing Yordle, which is a 3 energy, 2 might unit, so it's still fairly weak, and it's actually really weak for a 3-cost card. It has tank, so it must be assigned damage first. And it also has when you play me, draw 1. So again, all these Lecturing Yordles are trying to do is draw to our power cards. Yeah, they're a little weak. They can still fight battlefields. It does have tank, so it can protect your other units because it has to go first. So it's kind of like shielding bigger units so it can't be cleanly killed. So Electrum Yordle is nice. It's really good for a turn 2 play. And if you go second, it really bumps up your chances of seeing a turn 1 play because you can include this in it. So all in all, we run 8 2-cost cards and then 2 3-cost cards rounding out our turn 1 plays. This is kind of an odd package. This is the Darius package. Now, I have it here because I was going to put Noxian Hopeful in the deck, but the Noxian Hopeful doesn't go in like any other package. Darius probably was going to sit here on my Bombs package, but then it would be like one card, and it's one card's not a package in itself. And they do kind of go together. So this is what I'm calling the Darius package. And Darius we're running Darius Trifarian, the Fury Darius, and he is a 5 energy, 1 power unit with 5 might. So he has on-rate stats, right? 5 energy, 1 power for 5 might is, you know, it's okay, right? I think it's on the upper end. It's just pretty good. But let's look at his effect. When you play your second card in a turn, give me +2 might this turn and ready me. And that is a very powerful effect. And one of the cool things is, right, Darius counts himself, right? So he is card 1. So what you can do is you go up, you play Darius, and then if you're on like 7 resources, what you can do is you can play the Noxus Hopeful, which says it's a 4 energy, 4 might card with Legion. And what Legion is you get the effect if you've played another card this turn, and he costs 2 less. So on 7 runes, you go Darius into Noxian Hopeful, and Darius readies. And now you have, and he gets 2 might. So you have a 7 might unit that is ready for essentially 7 energy, 1 power. Because you got to discount him by 2. And if we look at the other cards that can kind of do that, right, with 7 energy and 1 power, it actually is like pretty competitive. It actually compares to Master Yi Hone, which enters ready, but he only has 6 might and he's 7 energy, 1 power. Like, this is a really cool thing that you can do. And Darius isn't only like when he's played. So if you play Darius on your next turn, if you go to conquer somewhere and then you get to play 2 cards, like you play, let's say, your Watchful Sentry, and then you play a Noxian Hopeful, Darius can then ready, and then he can actually come out. So you can conquer with Darius, and then retreat with Darius, kind of like, you know, like dive the towers with Darius. And that's pretty good, right? Because we're not a hold-based strategy. Like I said, we kind of want to get in, get our conquer, and get out sometimes. So Darius is a really, really strong unit. This is the alt art if you're curious. And he can do a lot of things that others can't, right? Like, effectively accelerate for 7 if you play any other card is really strong with Darius, and then you can keep like readying and bouncing and diving in and diving out. So I really like Darius in this deck. He's a really strong card, something we really try and look for. And then Noxian Hopeful is a good card. He pairs really well with Darius because, again, Legion, I cost 2 less. So even on turn 2, right, if you go first, and let's say you played your Watchful Sentry, and let's just say, because I have it on top of my deck, you have another Watchful Sentry in hand. So you played your Watchful Sentry, you've got a Watchful Sentry on the board, and then on turn 2, if you have 4 resources, you just go Watchful Sentry into Noxian Hopeful, and you put 5 might on the board across 2 units. A 4-cost 4 might unit is not that good, but a 2-cost 4 might unit is insanely good, and that's why these guys are in here. They're just a really efficiently statted unit if played second, and since we have a lot of cheap units, and we'll get to them, we have a lot of cheap spells, we can often play this guy for 2. And that's the Darius package. Nothing too crazy. It's basically Darius is a big unit. He can enter ready. He can dive bases. And that's kind of what we're looking for. And now we're going to get into the power cards package. And the power cards package is, you know, the cards that we're trying to draw to, the cards that we're trying to see more often. And Darius would probably fit in this. But like I said, I just made him his own separate package. First up here is the best card in the game, in my opinion, and that's Thousand-Tailed Watcher. The Thousand-Tailed Watcher is a 7 energy, 1 power unit with 7 might. And again, you can compare that directly with Darius. It's, you know, Darius 7 might, and it would be 7 power. And Thousand-Tailed Watcher does have this accelerate cost. So for 8 energy and 2 power, it can come in ready. So it's a little bit more expensive than Darius. But why it's such a good card is the effect, when you play me, give enemy units -3 this turn to a minimum of 1. In theory, Thousand-Tailed Watcher, like at worst, if you're diving a tower, is like 10 might, right? And what makes Thousand-Tailed Watcher so strong is that you pay your 8 energy, 2 power, you get to lay them on the field, and you get to accelerate, and you get to shrink every enemy unit on the field. So what Thousand-Tailed Watcher gets to do, he goes in and he attacks, and if your opponent was like holding something with a dead bloom, well, guess what? It's now at 5 power, so you go in, and then you have 7 might, they have 5 might, and you overtake them when you probably shouldn't. He's also good even if you don't accelerate him, right? Because if you have a big base, you just drop him down, you pay 1 power, and then you can just go in with all your other units and clean up and conquer all the battlefields you want. So Thousand-Tailed Watcher is an extremely strong card. And when compared to everything else, he's just like really, really good. Like there's no other card that does kind of what he does. Like the amount of shrinkage he gets is insane. And like another thing with Thousand-Tailed Watcher is it's not only just that he can go in and attack, right? We have Hex Tech Ray sitting here, which you can see what deals 3 damage to a unit at a battlefield. If you play Watcher and have 1 rune left over, well, it already shrunk something for 3 might. It actually can put things in range of your targeted spells to defeat them. So like that's actually a really powerful effect. Watcher not only can help you conquer battlefields and not only helps you get better trades with your units, it also just can let you put units into the range of your spells before you go in and conquer. So you can get free conquers with your smaller units. Thousand-Tailed Watcher is an easy 3 include. It is just the best card in the game, and I just don't know what you would be doing without it. The other card that I use is I actually use Time Warp. Now, I think this was used in China a bit towards the end. It's just an insane card. What Time Warp is kind of simple. It's a 10 energy, 4 power card that simply says, take a turn after this one, banish this. And banishing just means it doesn't go to your trash, so you couldn't like recycle it. Time Warp giving you an extra turn is obviously for like hold strategies, which I didn't say we were, but we could be towards the end of the game. And in certain situations, holding battlefields is pretty strong. Time Warp allows us to get around like this pesky 8th point condition, right? So if you don't know, to get the final point of a game, you either need to hold a battlefield or conquer both. And Time Warp essentially can let you conquer 1 battlefield, Time Warp, hold that battlefield and win, right? So it's a way to get around that. Another thing Time Warp has let me done a lot is if you're on 4 points, your opponent tries to drop Dazzling Aurora, which is one of our worst matchups. You go, okay, you Dazzling Aurora, you got your first card, that's fine. Well, I'm going to go in, I'm going to conquer both fields, and you're tapped out because you played your Dazzling Aurora. We Time Warp, we go to the next turn, we hold 2, and we went from 4 points to 8 points without your opponent ever getting another turn. So Time Warp can win you games like that. And having Time Warp in your deck means that from 4 points on, if you have 10 resources, your opponent has to keep Time Warp in mind, and you could just win if they don't. So they can't really tap themselves out unless you get a free shot at Time Warping. That's a big deal. The other thing about Time Warp is you look at the power cost and you're like, okay, that's kind of crazy. But you actually think about it, in a normal deck, it only is 2 power because you play Time Warp and then you ready 2 runes at the start of the next turn. So you get to replenish the 2 of the 4 runes that you recycled. In Kaisa, that's actually only a 1 power cost because you get to use Kaisa's ability, negate 1 of the powers, and then the next turn you negate the other 2. So Time Warp becomes 10 energy, 1 power. And that's a really good rate for a card that gives you an extra turn. It doesn't even set you back a whole turn. It only sets you back half a turn. You can do something stupid like Time Warp this turn. You'll have 9 energy on your next turn. You can go Time Warp into Thousand-Tailed Watcher if you needed to like catch something. Time Warp is an insane card. I run 2. I actually have 1 in my sideboard as well. A lot of decks like Dazzling Aurora, if they get Dazzling Aurora online, it can be really, really tough. So once they drop Dazzling Aurora, if you're at 4, you can just overcommit, conquer, Time Warp, and then win before they even can, get Dazzling Aurora's value to continue going. And I've won, I think, 3 games off of Time Warp alone into Dazzling Aurora. Time Warp, insane card. Unfortunately, it's an expensive card, and there's really nothing like it, but we will talk about how to replace this in the budget section. So in the power cards, I run 3 Watchers, I run 2 Time Warps, and you really want to get to these cards, and then once you have them in hand, it usually is game over. Next up, I want to talk about combat tricks. Riftbound has a bunch of cards that I call combat tricks. These are cards typically you play during showdowns that help you get the advantage in that showdown. So initially, I run 3 Stupefies, and Stupefy is just a really on-rate card. It's kind of low impact, but it does, it's low impact on the showdown, but does kind of a lot. For 1 energy, with reaction timing, so the quickest timing in the game, you can play it anywhere. You give a unit -1 might this turn to a minimum of 1 and draw a card. So often you can actually play this early in a showdown as a reaction, cycle to see if you get a better card that helps you win the showdown. That's why Stupefy is good. It's not just a cycle, but it does a little bit more, right? It's a cantrip card, and it's really powerful as a cantrip. And it's just pretty efficient. It also can let you drop cards into more efficient lines. So if you Thousand-Tailed Watcher and they Dead Bloom, you can Stupefy the Dead Bloom and then you trade and you don't just die. So I really like Stupefies, nice little cantrip. A card that I'm not that big on, but it can just like really swing you games sometimes, is Cleave. Cleave's a 1 energy card with the action timing, so a little bit slower than Stupefy. You can only play it on your turn or when you have the action in showdowns. And it's give a unit Assault 3 this turn. Now, Action actually doesn't hurt this card too much, because if you go to swing in, you can action first, right? If you start a showdown with a card, right? So if I go Watchful Sentry, I go into a battlefield. Since I am attacking, I get priority first, which means I can take the first action. So you can go Watchful Sentry into Cleave. Now they can react to Cleave and get rid of you, but Cleave isn't that bad as an action timing because you're assaulting and you really aren't going to use it as a reaction most often. And it can give you like a really good trade, right? It's when I find my Ravenbloom student here, right? So Ravenbloom with Cleave, if you go turn 1 Ravenbloom, and then on turn 2, you go in and you conquer a battlefield, and let's say they have a big unit there, and then you put Cleave on it. So for only 1 extra energy, she gets +4. She's a 6 might unit on turn 2 with only 1 energy to spend. And if you went first, that means you have 3 runes left over, and you could play a 3-drop, or you could play another 2-drop and another 1-drop, right? Cleaves are really strong with Ravenbloom student. They're really strong, honestly, with any of your turn 1 plays if you're trying to conquer over somebody to get the early conquer points. I do like it. It's a little situational. I only run 2. Another card I like a lot is Retreat. It's a 1 energy card with reaction timing. It says return a friendly unit to its owner's hand. Its owner channels 1 rune exhausted. Retreat is not only a half-turn ramp, which is, kind of overlooked on this card, but it also lets us keep one of our precious bombs like Watcher, Kaisa, Darius from being killed, right? So oftentimes you can actually bait or even force your opponent into using cards like Discipline to buff up their units. And then whenever you're like, okay, they're going to win this battlefield anyway, you go, I'm going to retreat my unit, pull it back, channel 1 rune exhausted, and then go to the next turn. And one thing that's really cool about Retreat that I think is so often overlooked is Retreat, the extra rune, usually is designed to pay for the power cost, right? If you play Darius and then you go to Retreat Darius, well, you channel a rune and then you take care of the power cost that it would be to play that big unit again. Retreat honestly lets us play, bring back our big units for free most of the times. And if we hit Kaisa with it, oftentimes it's like a +1/2 a turn. So I really like Retreats. It can make us waste our opponent's combat tricks and then be like, okay, well, you get no value out of it because we're just going to retreat our unit back. Retreat, strong card, overlooks the channel 1 rune exhausted, which we can use to great effect. So don't forget to channel your rune when you retreat. It's really strong. And then the last card that's actually the only combat trick that doesn't cost 1 is Smokescreen, which is a 2 energy 1 power card with reaction timing again. And it simply says, give a unit -4 might this turn to a minimum of 1. And this is kind of just an okay card in other decks, right? Because paying 1 power for -4 to kind of win 1 showdown isn't always that good. But in Kaisa, it's really good because we get to ignore this power cost most times. So a 2 energy card that says, I win early showdowns effectively, right? -4 might is a lot of might to shrink early on is significant in this deck. And I do run 2. There's an argument to even run 3. It's really good into Master Yi because their whole point is I'm going to have 1 unit defending a battlefield. So, because they get their buff from it. So you just go, okay, well, I'm going to smoke screen it for free, bring in my Ravenbloom. My Ravenbloom's now 3 might because I played a spell, and you're -4. So we had a net swing of 7 might. And oftentimes early on, they might not be able to deal with that. And then we also have Stupefies and Hextech Rays to finish them off. So smoke screen brings units down so that we can get them with our removal or have friendly trades in battlefields. And ignoring the power is key on why this is included in this deck. Otherwise, it's kind of just like an okay card because losing half a turn is not always what you want to be doing, especially early on, right? You want to get to your power cards. And lastly, let's talk about removal. So removal is big in this deck, and it's kind of what I think initially this deck started out with, a lot more removal, a lot less units, but it's leaned a little bit more towards units because you don't need that many removal spells in this game when you have good units and you can conquer early. I do think one of the marquee spells that Kaisa runs is Hextech Ray, and it kind of defines why she's good. A 1 energy, 1 power card that says action, deal 3 damage to a unit at a battlefield. And typically this is kind of just meh because you deal 3 damage and then you have to pay a power, so you lose half a turn. In Kaisa, you get to ignore that. So for just 1 energy, you deal 3 damage to a unit with action timing. That's a lot better than paying the power. And we run 3 Hextech Rays because it's just so good in Kaisa to just be able to cheaply go, I'm going to remove your turn 1 play, and now that I have 3 or 4 resources left over, I get to play a big unit and go in. and I don't lose half a turn like I normally would. Hextech Ray, there's not much to say about it. It's just a really efficient removal spell really early on. It helps turn on our Darius. It helps turn on, the Noxus Hopeful. So I really like it. It's, a 3 include. It's obviously a 3 include. The next card is Falling Star. And this is a 2 energy, 2 power card that says, do this twice. Deal 3 to a unit. And you can choose different units. It's kind of funny. It's effectively, 2 Hextech Rays put together, wearing a trench coat, right? Because it's 2 energy, 2 power, deal 2 sets of 3 damage, pretty much double. But there are 2 things about Falling Star that are different. Can you notice them? First one is it does not specify at a battlefield. And these are one of the few cards that can actually attack units in the base. And that is extremely important. I can't really explain to you how important it is to be able to target your opponent's base. Oftentimes they're going to bring their units back, and what they're going to do is hide them at their base so you can't get them with your Hextech Rays. Well, Falling Star doesn't care. The other thing about Falling Star is it's not action timing, so you can only do it on your turn. And that's a little bit of a downside, right? You can't use it as an action in your opponent's turn during a showdown. But if you could, it would be insane. So you can only use it on your turn, and it can target back row where Hextech Ray couldn't. And honestly, 2 energy, 1 power, since we get to ignore it with Kaisa, is pretty on rate. We see it in control colors. If you look at cards like Call the Weak, which makes each player kill one of their units, or Hidden Blade, which kills a unit at a battlefield, but also the controller gets to draw 2. Both of those are essentially saying kill a unit like Falling Star says, but they have a downside. Where Falling Star technically has an upside, because what Falling Star can do is not only hit things in the base, but you can also spread out the damage. So if they're running really weak units, you can hit both and kill 2 things where those only kill 1. Falling Star, on rate for a 2 energy, 1 power thing, and it has upsides where the other cards in its class kind of have downsides, and I just really like it. This is also one of the best cards to pair with Stupefy, because if you look at it, this and, let me grab Stupefy here. If you look at Falling Star and Stupefy, for essentially 1 power and 3 energy, you get to deal 6 might worth of stuff to a unit. It both don't specify battlefield, so you can hit for 7 at your opponent's base. And if you look, cards like Watcher have 7 power. A card like Darius turned on, 7 power, right? There's a lot of cards in this game that have 7 power exactly. And so by going Stupefy into Falling Star on your turn, for only 3 resources, 1 power, you get rid of a lot of late game strong units. So Falling Star and look for stuff like that, right? Combos with Falling Star. Falling Star is just really strong. I really like it. Double Hextech Ray, can hit things in the base, which is important. Next is Void Seeker. I initially had 3 in my deck. I took 1 out. So Void Seeker is a 3 energy, 1 power card with action timing. It says deal 4 to a unit at a battlefield and draw 1. So you can see right here, it does specify battlefield only, which is a big of a downside, and you get to draw 1. 4 damage is not that good. If you compare it here, we already can do 6 damage for, 1 more power and 1 less energy, but you do get to draw a card, and it's also an action, so you can play it during showdowns. It's just not that efficient, but the draw 1 does let us find our power cards. I do run 2. It's not a bad card. I do see some people moving all of these to the sideboard. I wouldn't say that it's wrong to do so. I just kind of like it, especially for the draw ability. Next up is Acathian Rain, which is a 7 energy, 3 power card that says, do this 6 times, deal 2 to a unit, and you get to choose different units. It also does not specifically state battlefields. So again, you can just basically annihilate your opponent's back row at their base, which is really strong in the game and extremely important. Literally, I can't overstate enough how important it is to target cards at a base, not a battlefield. And what's so great about Acathian Rain is it's just so flexible. Do you need to hit a really big unit that has 10 might? Well, good. You put 5 in and then you can do 2 to something else. Do you need to kill a bunch of mid-range units? Each of them have 4 might, right? You can do that. Do you need to just do a bunch of 1/1 recruits? You can do that, right? The flexibility that Acathian Rain gives you is just unparalleled in the game. And you can go I need to get rid of a unit at this battlefield, that battlefield, and your base. You can do that, right? Acathian Rain is just so strong. Like I say, Kaisa moves 1 power, so for 7 energy, 2 power, it's really strong, really effective. There's really nothing else that can do something like it. There's one other card that's like similar. I actually have it in the sideboard. We'll talk about it here in a second. Unchecked Power, it's 7 energy, 2 power, right? So if you get rid of the 1 power with Kai'Sa's ability, it says exhaust all friendly units, deal 12 damage to all units at a battlefield. And you can see where the difference is. This does more damage, but it only targets a single battlefield, where Icathian Rain can target, basically whatever the hell it wants. Also worth noting, like, yes, it technically, if you're really fishing for like a single card, I don't know why you would ever do this, but like if you're fishing for a single card and you have Watchful Sentry, you could like Icathian Rain because it doesn't specify enemy units. It's just something you can think about. Just the amount of flexibility Icathian Rain has, insane. I actually would be running 2. I only run 1. There is technically 1 in the sideboard, but it's the same card. I'm just going to use editing magic to make you think that it's, 2 cards. But I only own 1. If I had 2, I would probably put 2 in the main deck, but I don't. So, Icathian Rain's final card in the main deck. And so we're going to put these aside for now. So now let's talk about battlefields. And you run 3 battlefields in your deck. And a lot of times battlefields are like kind of dependent on you, right? Their personal preference. The 3 that I run are Targon's Peak, Windswept Hillock, and Reaver's Row. I use Targon Peak, which says when you conquer here, ready 2 runes at the end of this turn. So we can spend our entire turn conquering Targon's Peak, and then at the end step, you get to ready 2 runes to play like Hextech Ray and Stupefy to help you hold Targon's Peak. We run Windswept Hillock, which says give units here ganking, and the reason I use this is because I just think the ability to gank is good. We can commit to Windswept Hills, and then on the next turn, immediately pressure the other battlefield if our opponent tries to dodge us. This also can allow for strong Time Warp plays, since if we hold Windswept Hillock and then Time Warp, we can score a hold point and then easily gank over to the other battlefield, scoring on all battlefields in a single turn and winning the game if we were at 6 points. Windswept Hill, pretty good card. I could see if people don't want to run it, it wouldn't, I don't think it's wrong not to run it. And lastly is Reaver's Row, which says, when you defend here, you may move a friendly unit to the base. And this is just a nice card. We're not a hold-based strategy deck, like I said. A lot of times we want to dive, and sometimes we can strand our cards, right? Oftentimes you actually strand your Kai'Sa unit because you go in and dive and you can't pull her out on the same turn. What this does, if we go and we conquer Reaver's Row, well, and if our opponent tries to take over Reaver's Row, we just go, okay, Kai'Sa's going back to our base. It's what I wanted to do anyway. You get to keep your card. You were going to lose Reaver's Row anyway, but you just get to save a unit, right? Those are the 3 bases I use. If you have another base that you think would be helpful, post it in the comments below. These are just the 3 that I like the most right now. Next, let's talk about the sideboard. So like I said, one of our worst matchups is Dazzling Aurora decks. Since a lot of times they slam Aurora down, if we don't contest enough, we don't have enough conquer points, they can just basically get online with Dazzling Aurora before we can do anything. And then they're dropping, 8 might, 7 might, 12 might units. We just can't do anything about it. So a lot of our sideboard is kind of tailored to that matchup. And, sometimes the Master Yi decks are 50-50s, and it basically comes down to who teched into who the most, right? Our sideboard is 3 Thermo Beams, and the reason why we run Thermo Beam, it says 5 energy, 2 power, action, kill all gear. And the reason why we run it, if your opponent's playing Dazzling Aurora, this gives us an out to get rid of Dazzling Aurora. If they play 9 energy, 2 power, and for 5 energy, 1 power with Kai'Sa's ability, we just basically say, no more Dazzling Aurora, you got your 1 free unit, but now you're behind, you lost one of your Dazzling Auroras, and we're just going to try and conquer before you get the second one online, right? I run 3 of those in the sideboard, really good into gear decks, and it's a really good out into gear decks. Next up, I kind of stole this from the Chinese national champion. It's Mega Mech. It's literally simply just a 7 energy, 8 might unit, and I haven't run this too much, but the idea behind it is I'm pretty sure it's just another big unit that's 8 might to, contest bigger boards like Master Yi and Dazzling Aurora, because you put Mega Mech down, it can contest, it doesn't set us back any with power, and then you can use Hextech Ray to hit big units, Stupefy, Smokescreen, right? So it can actually beat over a lot of other cards simply by just, being a big dumb beat stick, right? So we put one of those in there, and then the other parts of the sideboard are cards that we've kind of already talked about. Unchecked Power, 7 energy, 2 power, exhaust all friendly units, deal 12 damage to all units at a battlefield. Idea behind Unchecked Power, if we don't get Thermo Beam early on, and our opponent does get Dazzling Aurora on the board, Unchecked Power is an out to get rid of one of the battlefields, clear it off. So we might be able to go in and take it, and then maybe we're already ahead on power because a lot of times Dazzling Aurora decks don't contest early. So Unchecked Power gives us that time to maybe like, okay, you've, committed to a battlefield, unchecked power, and now we can go take it and start getting conquer and holds. I really like unchecked power in the sideboard for bigger decks once they get out of hand, right? It's just the way to get out of that. And then the last two cards we've already talked about, Icathian Rain and Time Warp. In case you need them for certain matchups, in case you need to hit big things or against token decks, Icathian Rain. And if you're going up against like another Dazzling Aurora deck, a third Time Warp. That's the sideboard. Next, we're going to talk about sideboarding. So this is basic, and take this all with a grain of salt. For me, this is just a discussion. I'm not saying I'm right, you're wrong. I just want to try and say these are the suggestions I would make when I'm sideboarding into certain matchups with the sideboard that I showed. Against Master Yi, I would bring in Megamech, Icathian Rain, and Time Warp. And I would take out a Stupefy, a Void Seeker, and a Noxian Hopeful. The idea here is that we take out Stupefy and Noxian Hopeful because against Master Yi, they don't do a ton. And we're going to bring in the power cards that do a lot, like Megamech, which can contest, Icathian Rain, which can remove, and Time Warp, which can win the game. And against Dazzling Aurora decks, the only thing that really matters is getting to our late game power cards. And a lot of the early game doesn't matter that much as long as we're conquering enough battlefields. And what we really need to do is have counters to Dazzling Aurora itself. We bring in the third Time Warp, 2 unchecked powers, and the 3 Thermo Beams. The reason why we do this, obviously, take out Dazzling Aurora. If they do get Dazzling Aurora online, we get to be able to defeat all their units with it. And then Time Warp essentially lets us win the game. The cards that I would take out, 1 Void Seeker, 3 Hextech Rays, and a Noxian Hopeful. The reason why Hextech Ray against Dazzling Aurora doesn't do that much because they're not playing any units with less than 7 might, right? So Hextech Ray isn't going to do much for us. Void Seekers are essentially the same thing, right? 3 energy, 1 power to deal 4 damage and draw a card, which is often just draw a card. Not that impactful, and we'd much rather be able to take out Dazzling Aurora or all their big units. And then the Noxian Hopeful, while it is good and lets us conquer early on, oftentimes we're still getting to the late game and we need an answer, and we have a bunch of other units. Missing 1 isn't going to, break the bank for us. Against Viktor decks, which aren't that popular in China, but they might be more popular in America, we'll have to see, I would bring in the 2 unchecked powers and the 1 Icathian Rain, and I'm taking out 2 smoke screens and 1 Stupefy. Reason why is they're playing a lot of 1/1 recruits, and then they buff them up with advanced stratagem. And yeah, you can smoke screen after they stratagem for one of their units. They still get to wide buff. And Stupefy oftentimes is a 1 energy draw a card. Not terrible, but what I think I would rather do is either remove all their units or remove all their units, right? Just removing their units no matter what they do. If they're going to advance stratagem, well, they can't advance stratagem after Ichthian Rage or Unchecked Power resolve. Doesn't matter, right? So I'd rather just remove all their units than try and do combat tricks and fight them too much. And lastly, the other deck that I want to talk about sideboarding wise is Baited Hook decks, which is another gear deck. And I'll put Baited Hook on screen because I actually don't own one right now. But all Baited Hook is just another gear-based deck like Dazzling Aurora, but they just don't go as big. They try and just get value with cards like Draven and Vi, which have low powers but have conditional power buffs that can be found easily with Baited Hook. And this might not be a surprise to you. We bring in 3 Thermo Beams and 1 Icathian Rain. Thermo Beams obviously take care of Baited Hook, and Icathian Rain can just wipe out their units when they play them, right? Because if they're going to find Draven or Vi, we'll just kill them before they get to do anything to us. And then against the Baited Hook decks, I'm probably taking out 2 Retreats and the 2 Cleaves. Reason being, we can assault and get the buffs with Cleave, but we're just going to be trying to remove their units anyway. And Retreats, they have a couple combat tricks. The goal is defeat Baited Hook, defeat their units, put pressure on, retreat, cleave. Kind of the best options, I think, to take out of the deck right now. I could change my mind by playing more into it. But again, game plan against all these Baited Hook decks and gear decks in general, kill the gear, remove the units that they try and bring in with the gear. That's kind of it. That's the end of the sideboarding discussion. I hope it was at least somewhat helpful. Next, I want to talk about the budget options for some of these main deck cards. Because, I get nobody wants to shell out, $300-$400 for a deck right out of the gate, especially if you don't know if you like the game too much. First up is Kai'Sa Survivor. So Kai'Sa Survivor, the only card that you actually can replace Kai'Sa Survivor with is Kai'Sa Evolutionary, since she goes in the Chosen Champion slot. Not much else I can talk about there, right? Next up is Falling Star. Falling Star has a replacement in Shakedown. So Shakedown It's still a rare, but it's a super cheap rare. So for the same energy cost and actually one less power cost, you get to do 6 damage, so same damage, but your opponent may be able to just say no and let you draw 2 cards. Both of which are good, but typically letting your opponent get to choose what you do with your cards isn't always what you want to be wanting to do, because you want to I want to really remove that card, and then just go, you just draw 2 instead. Not great, but it is something that you can do instead. Next up is Darius. Blazing Scorcher is technically 1 more power if you want to accelerate it, but Darius would also cost another energy to get its ready, and they both kind of do similar things. Blazing Scorcher is only 5 might, where Darius can, bump up, but effectively it is still relatively, cheap-ish, 6 cost range, accelerate cost. And, if you're trying to effectively accelerate Darius, you have to pay another card anyway. They're kind of equivalent. Darius, obviously the better option, but Blazing Scorcher, it could be a replacement. Next up is Thousand-Tailed Watcher. And Thousand-Tailed Watcher could probably be replaced by Riptide Rex. So for 1 less energy and effectively the same power if you accelerate it, he gets you deal 6 damage to a unit at a battlefield specifically. Kind of like Watcher if he hits 2 units. He gave it -3 might this turn, which is, kind of like 6 damage, but obviously not the same, right? And Watcher can accelerate, and Riptide Rex can't, so he's weaker in that regard. It's the only card I think that even remotely comes close to functioning like Thousand-Tailed Watcher. Honestly, if you were to put any money into this deck or any money into the game, buying Thousand-Tailed Watcher, I think, is one of the safest bets you can do because it's such a powerful card. Next up is Icathian Rain. And Icathian Rain might be possibly replaced by Singularity, which for 6 energy and 2 power can deal 6 damage to up to 2 units. So for 1 less power cost and 1 less energy, you get to do the same total damage of 12, but it's way less flexible, since you can only deal this 12 damage in 2 batches of 6, and it has to hit 2 separate units. It's just not nearly as flexible as Icathian Rain, but it does deal the same amounts of damage. It also can target things in the base, similar to why I, loved Icathian Rain so much. It's just a lot less flexible, but it's same damage, the same kind of restrictions, right? Where it's battlefields and bases, but it's just, you can't do it in batches of 2, you do it in batches of 6. And lastly is Time Warp, and this might be the hardest one to replace because there's really anything like Time Warp in the game. Honestly, what I would recommend you do is just play other good cards in the deck. And I know that's going to sound like a cop-out, but there are other good cards that you could run in the deck that kind of they don't just win you the game like Time Warp does, but they do something different. One of the cards that you could run is Progress Day, which is a rare, but it's still a cheap rare, and for 6 energy and 1 power, which again can be negated by Kaisa, lets you draw 4. So you can find that card that you did spend the money on that's going to win you the game. It's just, it's not Time Warp, but it lets you try and find your Watchers, your Icathian Range, your Dariuses, right? That's kind of where Progress Day could come in and kind of replace Time Warp. And that's kind of the best replacement card. But there are other cards that you can run that I haven't talked about. Think Spirit Mother, which does nothing like what Time Warp does. And it's a $5 uncommon, but it's a 4 energy, 1 power card with 3 might that says when you play me, play a ready 3 might spirit with temporary, which means it's killed before scoring happens, so it kind of holds a battlefield, but not really, because it's going to die before you hold it, but it can prevent your opponent from attempting to conquer that battlefield. And it kind of has its accelerate cost, because what happens is you play it, it spawns a little token, and that little token goes in and can do whatever the hell it wants. It's not Time Warp, but it is just another strong card that might win you the game earlier in the game, right? Because it puts you ahead because it's so efficient, and you wouldn't need Time Warp. But those are the 2 cards that I would say could be used in place of Time Warp. Nothing does what Time Warp does, so those are just other cards you could include. And lastly, I want to talk about the Rune Spread in the deck, because, we're running 2 colors, and, you could run 12 of 1 color, you could run, 6 and 6. So what's the right Rune Spread? So when looking at the power cost of our deck, we have 15 Fury power in our cards and 14 Mind power in our cards. So you might think, oh, well, that's 6 and 6. 8 of that is in Time Warp, because we run 2 with 4 power costs. We only need 3 blue runes to be able to play Time Warp whenever we get to it, right? Because we get to negate 1 with Kaisa. And then the other blue power cost we have is on Watcher, which is a late game card. So we have time to get to our blue runes. And the biggest thing here that I want to talk about, and this is kind of knowledge that I really thought about the deck. When you have 12 runes, right? You get 12 runes, and Time Warp is played on 10. So the question that I had was, how many runes minimum would it take that when you get to 10 runes, right, 10 energy that you could spend to play Time Warp, there's absolutely no way that you can miss. Because the worst thing that you could do is you miss, you have your runes that aren't channeled, that have the blue runes that you need that you can't get to. So what I did was I took 2 mind runes and I had them sitting here unchanneled. Those are the last 2 runes that I would need to channel to get to 12, which is the maximum runes you have because we have 10. And then what I did was I just flipped. All right. I would need 3 mind runes to be able to get to Time Warp because we can -1 with Kaisa. And that left me with 7. I'll flip this one around. That left me with 7 Fury runes. And so if we flip the other 2 mind runes, that leaves us at a spread of 7 to 5. So that's how I got to my spread. A lot of our Fury power cards are early on, right? Things like Hextech Ray, things like Darius, even things like accelerating our Kaisa leader. All of those are early on, and Watcher and Time Warp are later in the game. That's why I decided to go the way that I did. I think it's the right spread. There's literally no way if you get to 10 resources that you can miss a Time Warp because you have Kaisa. And that's really the important thing, is that whenever you get to Time Warp, you have a 100% chance of being able to Time Warp. So that's what we're talking about with the rune spread. Now, the last thing I would like to do is I would like to kind of do like a quick gold fishing. Like I want to go through a couple turns in the game, and I would like to go through a couple turns in a game just to see how the deck works. If you had questions about like what somebody would do, how somebody would play the deck, decisions that they would make, I'm not the best player. I'm not going to sit here and say like I'm the, the best player in the world. I'm winning all the championships, but I have played Kaisa a bit, and maybe we could talk about some of the plays that I make. Maybe you disagree, maybe you agree with my takes. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to set up my area here, and we are going to put 2 battlefields up, and these are just 2 of my battlefields, right? Doesn't matter. We got Reaver's Row, and I've got Windswept Hillock. And then I'm going to shuffle this on screen so you know that, I'm not cheating. I don't want to sit here and make you think that like, oh, he just, goldfish until he got the best hand, and then he showed us like the absolute nuts with Kaisa. That's not what I'm doing. And I do a lot of editing where I try and get rid of like the ums and the ands and the so's. But right now, everything is live. I'm going to do my best not to do any cuts, not to do any jumps. So if I have a long pause, I apologize. If I say something stupid, I apologize. But this gold fishing, I think, is actually really important to show kind of how the deck works, right? How the deck functions, how the deck is going to play, decisions that you make. I think it's really important. So that's, a bunch of shuffles. I'm going to cut my own deck. Hope you trust me. I trust me. I'm going to try and get everything here. I got my runes here. I do run out of room a little bit here. So we're going to do it like this. I hope this makes sense. I hope it's fine. We're going to say that we're going first. So we are going to draw 4. We got Time Warp. We got Hextech Ray. We got Darius and another Hextech Ray. So against a lot of decks, no matter what, I'm keeping my power cards. We're going first. If we miss our turn 1 play, we always have Kaisa's Survivor to go back on. I'm actually just going to recycle both Hextech Rays. I know it's kind of like, what are you doing? But we really need to try and mulligan for a turn 1 play to get our conquering done early. So I'm recycling both of them. I also see my cat coming over here, so she might make an appearance. We got a second Time Warp, and we got Raven Bloom Student. So we got a turn 1 play. All that's good. Going to channel 1 rune, channel the second rune, and we're going to go to town. So I'm going to try and keep my hand like here. I got my runes here. I'll do my best. But I think the obvious thing is don't forget to draw for your first turn, which I always do. We're going to go Raven Bloom Student for 2 at our base for our turn 1 play. And then we're going to pass to our opponent, who most likely plays a turn 1 play themselves. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to draw 1. We're going to ready our Raven Bloom Student. And we're going to channel 2 runes and ready these. So now we're at 4. We've got Raven Bloom Student. And our opponent, probably played something to their base and didn't do anything. So I think with Smokescreen in hand, it gives our Raven Bloom Student effectively 6 power like we talked about. So I'm actually not that worried. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go over and conquer Reaver's Row, because you can still bounce it back if they go to defend, right? Or if they go to attack, right? You can bounce it back on defend. So even if they send something big at us, we might not have to use this yet. I am going to spend 4 to bring in my Kaisa leader. I'm not going to accelerate her. This way I just get to spend all my resources. We're going to go up to 6 next turn. So we can't play Watcher. We could play Smokescreen. And we're going to have our 2 Time Warps, which is going to be really good. But the next play most likely is Darius. And also, since I played Kaisa, we can't even Smokescreen anymore, right? So playing Ravenbloom here lets us kind of save our Ravenbloom and get, the Conquer in. So we got 1 point. We've got our Kaisa out at our base safely. We've got, 4 power cards, and we're going to start being able to slam them down pretty heavily. And basically, one thing to think about here, right? And this is a big part of Riftbound. Next turn, we're going to have 6 runes. So if we play Darius and we spend 1 power, we're going to go down to 5. Then we go to 7 energy. We can't accelerate Thousand-Tailed Watcher, but what we could do with Thousand-Tailed Watcher is just play him, shrink everything, and then we'd have a Darius, a Kaisa, and a Ravenbloom student to kind of clean up afterwards. So we can go, on curve, but honestly, if we could avoid playing Darius right now, it would give us 1 more turn to get to Time Warp, and that's kind of a big deal. So, we've attacked, we've played our unit, we've got 1 point. Our opponent, their turn, I'm going to say they went to attack. We're going to bounce Ravenbloom student back, and they've probably got a unit at Reaver's Row and a unit at their base. And you can see we've got 5 cards at hand. We've got 5 good cards. It's our turn. We're going to go ahead and draw. We drew another Watcher. And then we're going to just channel 2 runes. And this is also where our Kaisa, chosen champion can come into play and be really strong for us. So let's say that they're on Reaver's Row now. Okay. We are going to send Kaisa into the Windswept Hillock. And let's just say that they couldn't do anything because they spent their turn playing a unit from their row and going and making sure they could take this. So we get to conquer, we get to draw, and now we have another unit that we can play without effectively doing anything stupid here by making recycling a resource so we can get to Time Warp quicker. So actually what I think we're going to do now is we have 6 runes and we have kind of 6 powers worth of things here, or 6 energy worth of stuff that we can play now. So I'm actually going to say we bring Ravenbloom student in and we can test over here. Assuming that they don't have a unit that's like 6 might, what you can do is you go, okay, well, we're going in there. We're going to Smokescreen. So we've shrunk something to 4 and we buffed her up to 3. So she's at 3, whatever they had. If it was at 5 might or less, it's now at 1. And we most likely got rid of it. And let's just say, for sake of argument, that they somehow traded us. So we don't get the conquer points. Ravenbloom student is dead. But now, for 2 resources only, we can play Noxie and Hopeful. And we're going to play it at our base. And we have 2 runes up for interaction. But as we know, it doesn't matter. But to our opponent, it might, because, we're playing Kaisa. We could have those Hextech Rays in hand. We don't, but we could. And look, we're probably going to lose Kaisa next turn, which kind of sucks. But we have a unit at our base. We're going to 8 runes next turn. And it looks kind of okay for us right now. We have 2 points, and we're going to go to our opponent's turn. And let's just say our opponent got rid of our Kaisa. I'm trying to be fair here to us. So they got rid of our Kaisa. Okay, not the greatest thing to happen to us, but it is what it is. So we're going to draw. We drew a Stupefy, and we ready 2, and then we draw. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. I'm an idiot. We channel 2 runes, and now we're at 8. So we're at 8 runes. We've got our 2 Time Warps, which we're really trying to get to. We got our Thousand-Tailed Watcher, got our Darius, and we got a Stupefy. We're 1 turn off from being able to Time Warp, but we only have 2 points, so maybe it's not worth it right now to Time Warp. So I think what we're actually going to do, we're assuming that our opponent, let's just say they have something at Windswept Hillock because they got rid of our Kaisa. I think I'm going to go 5, and I'm going to recycle a red. I'm going to play the Darius against, kind of what I really wanted to do here. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to stupefy whatever unit they had at this point. Reason being, right, we pay 1 more. And we get to draw the card, and it's -1 for this turn. Now we drew Falling Star. Okay, that's kind of a big deal. So we're at 7 runes, and we only have 2 capture points. We can't really get to Time Warp on this next turn because we had to play Darius. But now Darius is ready. The one thing that we can do is we can go Falling Star, and we're going to pay the last 2 runes. We're going to tap Kaisa. We're going to recycle only a single red to play Falling Star. And then what that does for us is, let's just say that we can target the unit that was here and kill it, right? Because we subtracted 1 from it. We're doing 6 more damage to it. So if it was 7 might or less, which is, reasonable, it's now dead and Darius is ready. So I'm actually going to move Noxian Hopeful into Windswept Hillock. Let's just say it captures. And we're going to move Darius over here with 7 might because he got ready because of the Stupefy. And let's say we capture there. Because oftentimes, they're not, like, we've done so much damage to them. I think I've been playing pretty fair and actually maybe even unfair to myself. So I think this is good. We have 4 points. And we have Darius with the ability to retreat at Reaver's Row. And if our opponent goes to, take out Noxus Hopeful, he takes out Noxus Hopeful. And then it goes to their turn. And let's just say that they had the absolute nuts. They're going to bounce Darius back. They're going to contest Reaver's Row. We lose Reaver's Row. And let's say that they also take Windswept Hillock from us. So they got 2 conquer points. And we just have Darius sitting at our base. We're going to ready 2 runes. And we're going to ready up here. Hope all this is making sense. I'm trying to, kind of goldfish somewhat realistically so you can just see the play lines, maybe not in their best shape, but something that we can do. And we got our second Falling Star, and we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 again. This is rough because if we play a Watcher, we can't Time Warp, but if we Time Warp, we don't have anything, so it doesn't matter. So I think what I'm going to do is my play line that I'm kind of planning on here is just going Double Watcher, because Double Watcher is pretty damn good. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, recycle 2 blues. And we're going to go ahead and play the Watcher. And it's accelerated. So it's ready. And everything is shrunk to 3. Or by 3. And depending on how it goes, right? Maybe we go Watcher here, Darius here. And most likely, if they got rid of both of our stuff last turn, they probably don't have that much interaction up. So let's just say that we conquer both. And I know that it might not be right to say that, but let's just say that we did. Go to the next turn. Let's say that they somehow killed Watcher, bounced Darius. We're going to, ready 2 runes. And we're at 6, right? I'm saying that we're at 6 points to, maybe 4 or 5, what our opponent has. We draw our next card. And at this point, maybe we dive Darius. Oh yeah, this would be a really good play, actually. So what we do is you go 1 to cleave Darius. So now Darius goes in as an 8. Or actually, hold on. We're going to rewind that for 1. Oh, no. Yeah, 1 second. Is you would actually go 2, tap 1, recycle 1, Falling Star to deal 6 damage to whatever unit's here. The reason we do that is because without a showdown finishing, the damage sticks. So right now, the damage would stick. There'd be 6 damage over here. And then you would move Darius in. And then as your first action, you would go ahead and cleave Darius. Because now, as your second card played that turn, Darius can ready. And he has +3 from Assault 3 from Cleave. And he has +2 from himself because it's the second card. And he's ready. So he's a 10 might unit that then, since he's ready and he has ganking, can go over here to Reaver's Row and conquer over there for 10. and that would go from 6 to 8, and that would win the game because we scored on both battlefields. And that's kind of the stuff that you can do in Kaisa. I know maybe the goldfishing didn't make that much sense. I hope it did. If you have any questions, let me know. But I think that was a good showcase of kind of like what the power of the deck is, what the deck can do, why I like ganking, some interesting play lines like, you know, the Darius cleave gank over stuff. And this is the final deck list. There will be a link to it in the description below, so feel free to check it out and tinker with it. It will be on Piltover Archive. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you wanted to join my Discord, that link will also be in the description below, as well as my TCG Player affiliate link in case you wanted to buy singles and support the channel. I would really appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed the video, have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you in the next one.